Hi guys, this is part 4 of my building an ultimate woods ball gun series, and today we're going to be talking about batteries and what type of batteries are best for paintball guns. So a lot of people this rechargeable batteries, and there's a lot of misinformation going around about using rechargeable batteries in your guns, and I'll try to clarify that not all rechargeable batteries are created equal, and there's some pros and cons to using rechargeable versus alkaline or lithium batteries. So there is multiple chemistries of batteries to begin with. First of all, there is nickel metal hydride rechargeable. There is nickel cadmium. There is lithium. There is like lithium polymer, for example. 9-volt lithium polymer batteries, rechargeable batteries, do exist. They're a little bit expensive, and I don't recommend you use them in your paintball gun. There is also zinc nickel 9-volt batteries, and some others. So we're going to be looking at nickel metal hydride rechargeables, alkaline primary batteries, meaning a single use batteries, and lithium primary batteries. So the major difference between these chemistries is capacity. So this battery here has about say, I think it's 1.1 amp hours capacity. This one is, let's look at the data sheet here. I printed off the data sheet from Duracell. Trying to find where they are. See, they're not specifying the capacity because it depends on how much power you draw from the battery. So I think I did some rough calculation. Okay, at 50 milliamps, 10 hours. So that makes it about half an amp hour. So this is about half an amp hour. This one is 230 milliamp hours, 9.6 volt battery, and this one is 8.4 volt battery, and it's 250 milliamp hours. The difference between those two is they're made up of cells internally, of lower voltage cells. So this one has one extra cell, but because the dimensions of the battery have to be the same, what they did is they reduced the overall size of each cell, and therefore the capacity of the cells is going to be lower, or the capacity of the overall battery is going to be lower because the cells themselves are smaller. Here the cells are bigger, so the capacity will be higher, but the voltage will be lower. And those batteries, those are rechargeable batteries. They're what's called LSD, or low self-discharge batteries, meaning that if you charge this up, about say 6 months later, it'll retain about 85% of its original charge. If you buy a rechargeable, say Energizer, just a cheap rechargeable batteries you get at shopping malls, those batteries will be dead within 24 hours or half dead, and then they will slowly drain to zero over the week. So there's a huge difference between low self-discharge and nickel metal hydride and standard nickel metal hydride. And yes, I do not recommend you use standard nickel metal hydride in your paintball guns, because if you charge them now and you go play next weekend, they're going to be dead, or they will die at the very beginning of the game. So for me personally, 8.4 volts low self-discharge medium rechargeable battery is the way to go, and I'll explain why. These things cost about $12 to $14 a piece, and realistically you can charge them between 200 and 300 times. Manufacturer might claim 500 or 1,000. That'll never happen, but 200 times it's pretty reasonable. Even if you charge it 100 times, if you charge it 50 times, it's still cheaper than buying Duracell batteries, because those could be between $2 to $5 depending where you buy them. So if you buy 10 of those at $2, that's $20. So that's already more expensive than buying one of those. And I'll show you how they act when you put them in the paintball gun. For this, we'll be using my multimeter, and we'll set it to amps to test what's called the maximum discharge current. So let me set it to amps right now, 10 amps range, and let's see which battery can produce more current. So this one is 9.6 volt battery, and I want you to look at the multimeter screen and look at the trend. So this is a short current. Basically, it's the same as putting a piece of wire across and measuring how much current the battery can produce. So as you can see, the current is dropping significantly. But this will drop to, I think, it'll keep dropping, but it'll stabilize at about 3 amps. This is 8.4 volt nickel metal hydride low self discharge. So you can see the current is going up, and it'll stay. It'll go up to about, I think, 7 amps and stay around there, and then it's going to start dropping as the battery discharges. So if for comparison, if you look at this lithium battery, remember this battery is 1 amp hour, this is 250. So this battery has 4 times the capacity of this battery. So you'd think, well, it's going to last a lot longer than my paintball gun, but let's look at the maximum discharge current. Okay, so about 600 milliamps, so 10 times less than this. So the amount of energy this battery can provide per second is 10 times lower than rechargeable nickel metal hydride. And now let's look at the standard alkaline. So about 1 amp. So why is the maximum discharge rate relevant? Well, the reason why, because the higher the maximum discharge current, the longer the battery is going to last under high drain conditions, because the discharge curve of the battery is not linear in relation to the load, meaning that, for example, if you take this battery and connect one light bulb to it, for example, and say the light bulb burns for 10 hours and then the battery dies. If you connect the second light bulb in parallel, 2 light bulbs are not going to glow for half the time, like for 5 hours in this case. They're actually going to work for 3 hours, and then the battery is going to die. If you connect, say, 3 light bulbs, instead of all 3 light bulbs working for, say, 3.3 hours, they're actually going to last for 10 minutes, and then the battery is going to die, because, like I said, the relationship between the load and discharge of the battery is not linear. And you can see, for example, this is a data sheet for this 9-volt Duracell, okay? And you can see, I know the fonts are really small, but right here you can see 2, 4, and 14 hours. So this is time. This is the voltage of the battery. It starts at 9.5 volts. And the curves here are for different discharge power. So 250 milliwatts, 500 milliwatts, and 1000 milliwatts. So you can see if you're discharging the battery at 250 milliwatts, the battery is going to die. The voltage is going to drop. The battery, 9-volt battery, is considered dead at about 7 volts. So you can see the 7-volt points here and here and here. Okay, so 7-volt point at 250 milliwatts is 8 hours. Okay, if you double the power consumption to 500 milliwatts, the service time is only 2 hours. So you would think if the relationship was linear, then doubling 250 milliwatts to 500 milliwatts power consumption would drop you down to 4 hours, but as you can see, it actually drops you to 2 hours. This is the non-linearity I was talking about. And if you discharge the battery at 1000 milliwatts, then you're going to have about an hour and a half, or actually less than an hour. There's a 7-volt point right here, less than an hour. So the point is, if your battery is under normal conditions is capable of providing very high currents, when you do demand those currents, the battery, for short periods of time, the battery is going to last longer. You're going to actually get more useful capacity out of the battery than a similar battery that can only provide very low maximum discharge currents like this one. So this one is, this battery is a little bit discharged in its defense, so it's not brand new. It can normally provide a little bit higher current than the multimeter showed. But it's still, if you put it in a high drain device, it's actually not going to last that long. Now, if you buy, for example, Energizer lithium battery that's designed for high drain applications, a 9-volt battery, it'll actually last longer than this ultralife battery, despite the fact that the capacity of both is about the same. I think it's about an amp hour, maybe an amp hour and a half. So going back to those batteries, so if you were to choose between 9.6 and 8.4 volts, I would actually go for 8.4 volt battery because it can provide much higher currents. it has a little bit higher capacity. So what will happen from the perspective of the end user is your paintball gun will show low battery condition earlier with this battery than the 9.6 volt battery, but the actual charge that's remaining in the battery will be higher with 8.4 volt than 9.6, and this again has to do with maximum discharge currents of those batteries. So another problem with rechargeable batteries, or any type of batteries for that matter, is you have to be careful about the initial voltage when the battery is fresh, meaning this is an 8.4 volt battery. So if I measure the voltage on this battery right now, I'm getting 9.1 volts, and if I measure the 9.6 volt battery, I'm getting 10.3 volts. So the issue is that in your paintball gun, on your gun board, this is just an eye board from my axe. There's nothing really interesting on there. But on the gun board, you would have a component called voltage regulator, which is a component that steps the voltage down from 9 volts. Or whatever the battery provides. If the battery is half dead, it's going to provide 7 volts. From whatever battery provides to, say, 5 volts, because the microchip, the microcontroller, which runs your gun, runs the screen and the button and the buzzer in your gun, or the voice prompts, voice menus, and so on, the LED lights. The microcontroller is designed to run at 5 volts. So it's going to be a voltage regulator that steps down from 9 volt, or whatever the battery provides, down to 5 volts. So when your 9 volt battery gets close to what's called the dropout voltage, which is the voltage at which voltage regulator stops working. So for typical voltage regulator, the dropout will be something like 1.5 volts, meaning that if it's putting out 5 volts, then the input voltage has to be at least 6.5 volts. So if your battery is providing less than 6.5 volts, your output voltage is going to start dropping, and your gun will freeze up or not work at all, or not cycle. And especially the solenoid itself actually runs at 9 volts or 8 volts or something like that. So solenoid doesn't go through the voltage regulator like the microcontroller or main microchip on your board. But the point is that the voltage regulator has a certain operating voltage minimums and maximums. So if you put the 9.6 volt battery in a gun that has a voltage regulator rated to maximum voltage 10 volts, and the battery actually provides 11 volts when it's fully charged, it will damage the voltage regulator and effectively fry your board. So you'll have to get a new board. This is why I don't recommend not using 9.6 volt rechargeable batteries in your guns. Also, you have to be careful when you buy lithium batteries, because those can also provide 10 or 11 volts when they're fully charged, and can damage your guns. So before you use any non-alkaline batteries like lithium or low self-discharge nickel metal hydride, I do recommend you contact the manufacturer of your gun and ask them, or the board, if you use a custom board like Ape Rampage, for example, contact the manufacturer and ask them what is the maximum voltage that the board can handle. And if they say 10 volts and you're putting in a 11 or 12 or whatever higher voltage battery, you will damage the board. So for that reason, I don't use those. Those batteries are for my multimeters, and for paintball guns, I use 8.4 volts. And they work just fine. I have it in my axe. I've used it multiple weekends. One of the drawbacks of nickel metal hydride versus alkaline is the discharge curve. The shape of the curve is slightly different. Meaning, just for an example, so this would be the discharge curve of an alkaline battery. Nickel metal hydride will actually go slightly down, the stay more or less flat, and then drop off. What that means, it's actually easier for your gun board to tell when your battery is dying, how much charge it has left compared to nickel metal hydride. So you could be halfway through the game, you can have, let's say, if you have like a screen on your gun that shows you a battery charge with like a bar graph, you can have, say, if your bar graph goes to 5 notches or 5 bars, at this point you're gonna have 5 bars, you're gonna have 4 bars here, you're gonna have 3 bars here, 2 bars here, 1 bar in here, and then the battery's gonna die at 7.5 volts right there. So because nickel metal hydride has a much flatter discharge curve, your battery is gonna show almost full, or it's gonna show, let's say, 3 bars to about this point, and then it's gonna show 2 bars and then 1 bar, and it's gonna die. So it'll be a little bit more difficult depending how the board is designed, but most boards, they rely on the batteries being alkaline. So if they have some sort of battery gauge, it won't be as accurate with rechargeable nickel metal hydrides. However, as long as you recharge it every 2 weekends, you'll be fine. Nickel metal hydride is not susceptible to memory effect, so you can charge those every weekend, or you can charge them every day, and they'll be just fine. Remember that it has a limited number of charge cycles. If you do charge it every day, and necessarily once you exceed the 200 charge cycles or so, the battery is gonna basically not take the charge or lose significant portion of its capacity. If you're wondering what type of charger I'm using PowerX MH-C490F charger. I believe it's a 4-hour charger, which is a little bit rough on the battery. The slower you charge the battery, the longer it's going to last in terms of discharge cycles, not the capacity of the battery itself. But it is convenient for me because it only takes 4 hours. I stick it on there, and then 4 hours later it's charged. Anyways, so if you're looking for the best battery, I recommend for your paintball gun, I recommend PowerX 8.4 volt low self-discharge Immedion batteries. One huge drawback of those batteries is cold weather play. As soon as your temperature drops to, freezing temperatures, these batteries will freeze, and they won't lose their capacity, but the maximum current that they can provide will drop significantly, so they might not be able to cycle your solenoid. In that case, if you're playing in winter and you're playing with electronic guns, get one of those things, or get Energizer or Duracell lithium 9-volt batteries. Lithium batteries do work in cold weather much better than alkaline or nickel metal hydride. So those things are for summer play only. And if you do use them in summertime, they'll save you hundreds and hundreds of dollars in alkaline. Also, you don't pollute the environment as much because you don't keep throwing those out, and a lot of people chuck them out on the fields, which is a big no-no. Don't ever chuck your batteries out in the fields. Take them back to the recycling, or throw them in the trash at the field entry or the lobby or whatever. I see a lot of CO2 tanks and batteries in the fields. Sorry for going on the rant, but don't throw trash out in the fields, or like water bottles, dead batteries, 12 gram CO2 tanks, 88 gram CO2 tanks, and so on. So not all batteries are created equal. Not rechargeable batteries are not bad for your guns as long as you use the proper kind, the low self-discharge nickel metal hydride. Don't use the crappy, cheap green or blue color, whatever they are, energizers that you buy from grocery stores for $5 rechargeables, because as I mentioned, they die very quickly. If you just leave them alone, they self-discharge from just being stored on the shelf. These things don't. They keep charged for very, very long periods of time. So the next show, we're going to talk about the tanks. And just a teaser. This is my new tank. You can see the size of it. And that's its big brother. This is not 13 cubic inch, by the way. So that's 13 cubic inch for comparison, so it's slightly smaller than 13 cubic inch. Anyways, see you next time.